Hello everyone, my name is Rachel. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am here to do my mid-July reading wrap up. I have 21 books to talk about in today's video, which is quite a lot. A few of these were rereads and a few of these were graphic novels. I'm excited to talk about all of these books with you guys, but first I thought I would talk a little bit about the makeup look that I'm planning on doing today, because this is a get ready with me style wrap up, which I'm always excited about filming. So I'm thinking of doing like a gold-ish eyeshadow look with my Soft Glam palette by Anastasia Beverly Hills. This is my favorite neutral palette. I'll just show you what the colors look like. This is also a fantastic palette to use for like bridal makeup, I feel like. And then for the lipstick, I'm so excited about this. So last week, Lenora Bell sent me an arc of her most recent release, which is Duke Most Wicked. This is the third book in her Wallflowers vs. Rogue series. This is coming out September 27th, and part of that package was a MAC lipstick. This is their retro matte lipstick in the shade Dangerous, which is just a bright red shade. So I'm gonna use this today with my makeup. So excited. Thank you so much, Lenora Bell, for sending me that lovely package. So why don't we go ahead and jump right on into it. Let me take off my glasses, and as usual with these kinds of videos, I have already done my foundation and concealer just to kind of speed things on a bit. So the first book I have to talk about is Make Me Yours by Melanie Harlow. This is book 2 in her Bellamy Creek series. You definitely don't have to read these in order, but I have, and I have really been enjoying this series so far. So this has to do with our two main characters, Cheyenne and Cole. This is a single dad romance. We love single parent romances. And also the heroine Cheyenne has been pining for Cole for like their entire lives. This is a small town romance series, by the way. So Cheyenne and Cole have been friends and have been living near each other their whole lives, but basically Cole married this other woman, and they got married, they had a kid. I believe she passed away in childbirth, and so now their kid is like 9 years old. So the catalyst for this whole story is that Cheyenne likes to draft up these texts where she confesses her feelings to Cole, and one night she gets drunk and she drafts this text detailing a sex fantasy that she has of him and with him. She accidentally sends it. She's mortified, but he replies back with "keep going." And so they start sexting, and then he calls her, and then they have really hot phone sex. And then things just go on from there. I ended up giving this 4.5 stars. I really enjoyed it. I have a very specific reason for not giving this 5 stars, and I'll get into that in a second because it's kind of goofy. But yeah, I don't usually love romances where like the heroine is the one that's been pining for the hero for years, and like the hero's been kind of oblivious about it. But I thought that Melanie Harlow did a really good job with this one, and we do see that Cole definitely has feelings for Cheyenne. He just he has his reasons for not acting on them. I also really enjoyed Cole's anxiety representation and his whole journey with that, and coming to terms with the fact that he needs therapy, as like honestly we all need therapy. Okay, so the reason why I didn't give this 5 stars. So I think for the most part this book was pretty sexy. I think book 1, which is Drive Me Wild, was sexier, but I do think that Melanie Harlow overall does a good job of writing small town romances that are still pretty steamy. I think a lot of the time small town romances can be pretty conservative when it comes to the sex scenes, but I do think that for the most part Melanie Harlow goes there. Now, my thing, however, is that Cheyenne had this very specific fantasy that she wanted to act out with Cole, and he was game, he was totally for it. But then we got to that scene where they went to act it out and it was fade to black. Like, how dare you, Melanie Harlow? Like, you're gonna build up this idea and then just like move on to the next scene. I was like, what is wrong with you? So yeah, I gave this 4.5 stars, but I still really enjoyed it. Definitely still recommend it. So next up we have Becoming Calder, and I do have a physical copy of this. This is by Mia Sheridan. This is kind of book one in, I guess, a duet, romance duet, but it's also a book within like a larger companion romance series that Mia Sheridan has written, because I think there's like 12 books. Now, I don't know if all 12 of these books are interconnected, but I know for sure this book and then the second book, Finding Eden, these two books are definitely connected. They are definitely a series. They follow the same couple. But this centers around Calder and Eden. They both live in this very conservative religious cult society. They do everything on their own. They grow their own crops. They truly are like their own society away from the world. And so Calder has grown up in this cult. We have Eden, who was brought in when she was like 8 years old, basically the leader of the cult. I can't remember his name, but he just like found Eden. We don't really know the full story behind that. I'm sure we're gonna find that out in book 2, but he like found Eden when she was 8 years old and brought her to the cult to straight up just be groomed to be his bride when she turns 18. So for the last like 10 years in the present timeline of this book, like she's just been raised to eventually be his wife. And what's even more icky about that is that he's been kind of raising her as a father figure this whole time, yet also, you know, like I said, grooming her to be his bride. It's very, very creepy, obviously. But Calder and Eden start having feelings for each other and start seeing each other in secret. And obviously this is a very forbidden romance, given that she is betrothed to the prophet of this cult. So I gave this 4 stars. I think that this is a really great recommendation if you love really dark forbidden romances. You know, this book definitely goes to some pretty dark places. And just like with other books that I've read by Mia Sheridan, this definitely has a suspenseful vibe to it. Like, I feel like you could almost call her romance as romantic suspense. As usual with Mia Sheridan as well, beautiful, beautiful writing. I really do adore her writing style. My main thing with this book, and the reason why I didn't give it 5 stars, is that I found the pacing to be pretty slow the entire time. And I also felt like this book could have been edited down quite a bit more. Like, I think maybe even like 50 pages could have been taken out. But this is still a really good, like I said, dark romance. Has a very solid cliffhanger, and I am planning on reading the sequel, which is Finding Eden, pretty soon. I don't know when that's gonna happen, but I definitely want to get to it soon before I forget too much of what happened in this book. So next up we have Royally Matched by Emma Chase. This is book 2 in her royalty romance series. Now, I read book 1 of this series back in like 2020. It's been like 2 years since I read the first book. Now, just like with every other, you know, romance series out there, these are companion novels. You don't necessarily have to read them in order. So this is just a book that has been sitting on my TBR for years at this point, right? So it was definitely well past time that I finally read it. This is also one of Ava's favorite romance books ever. Ava from Ava's Romance Books. I will link her channel down in the description below. Actually, while I was reading this book, I was messaging her about it and we were just gushing about how good it is. But this centers around Henry, who is now the heir to the throne of the fictional country of Wesco. By the way, I've always found that name to be a weird name for a country, Wesco. Like, that sounds like the name of a company or something, but anyways. So we have Henry. He never thought that he was going to be heir to the throne because his older brother was always heir, but in the previous book of the series, he ended up abdicating the throne to be with his love interest. And so now Henry is stuck with the throne and he definitely doesn't want this job. Henry is definitely like a flirtatious, irreverent hero. I love those kinds of heroes that are kind of like arrogant and smug and funny and yeah, all of those things. But he ends up doing this Bachelor-like reality show, but like royalty edition. And so these 20 women are competing to be the next queen of Wesco, essentially. And so Then we have Sarah, our heroine, and her sister, I think her sister's name is Penelope. She decides to go on this reality show. And Sarah is a very, very shy, she's a bookish heroine. She also has this PTSD-like disorder where loud noises can potentially trigger her to go into like this fugue state, where she just kind of goes very still. It's kind of like she's blacking out, because then when she comes out of it, she doesn't really remember what happened when she was in this fugue state. So I thought that that representation was really interesting. I've never read anything quite like that in any book before, let alone a romance novel. And so Sarah goes basically to keep her sister company. Meanwhile, pretty much right from the get-go when they show up to the palace, Henry and Sarah have this very strong connection. And so things just go on from there. I will never get over, like I said, the irreverent flirty hero with a shy bookish heroine. Like, that dynamic is always crack to me. I loved Henry so much. Oh my god, he's so funny. And I did listen to the audiobook for this one, and I thought that Shane East did a fantastic job as Henry. Like, just like the perfect delivery of all of his dialogue and his POV in general. I do want to quickly mention that Andy Arndt narrated the POV for Sarah, and I love Andy Arndt, but she cannot do a British accent to save her life. Like, girl was struggling. Like, I don't usually criticize audiobook narrators because I think that what they do is amazing, and usually, you know, I don't have anything to say, but I am an actor myself, and so I'm usually pretty good at being able to tell when someone is struggling with an accent or something like that. So I just want to throw that out there. I still think that the audiobook is worth listening to, but yeah, I definitely took note of that. I also loved, like, there was just so much character growth from both Henry and Sarah, and by the end of the book, you truly believe that these two people are ready to be the next king and queen of Westco. So I absolutely adored this. I totally see why Ava loves this book so much. All right, next up we have My Dad's Best Friend by Kitty Robert. This is book, I want to say it's like book 3 in her Touch of Taboo series. This is definitely a series of standalones. By the way, you do not have to read these in order, but I just have been, just because I'm that kind of person. But this is a series of erotic romance novellas, heavy on the erotic part of the romances for sure. Like, these novellas are hot, and they really are a touch of taboo. They're not really like the most taboo romances out there, but it's just enough, you know? So this one is about Blake and Jonas. And so, like the title says, Jonas is Blake's dad's best friend. And so we're seeing at the beginning of this book that Blake has recently taken over her father's company. I believe she runs like some kind of like architecture firm, and so Jonas has worked with her father for years doing that. So basically, since Blake took over the company, Jonas refuses to work for both her and her company. And so we see that in the past, Blake tried to make something happen between the two of them, but this was when she was quite a bit younger, and so he straight up just rejected her. And now she has just shown up to his house because she's desperately trying to get him to design a house for a client of hers. They desperately want Jonas to be their architect. So she ends up kind of being trapped there for the weekend due to some extreme weather, and so they start talking about why they shouldn't be together, but why she desperately wants to be with him, and they just can't deny their attraction. And so they just start having sexy times the entire weekend, and this was just so freaking hot. I gave this 5 stars. I still think book 1, which is Your Dad Will Do, is my favorite of the series, but this one is a very close second. I had a really fun time with this one. I would definitely highly recommend it. Next book that I read is Part of Your World by Abby Jimenez. I do have a physical copy of this book. I do have the book of the month edition. This is a traditionally published romance, obviously because it's book of the month, from Forever Romance. And this is my very first book from Abby Jimenez that I've ever read, but I was turned on to this book by Bree from In Love and Words. I will of course link her channel down below. She's who I turn to for contemporary romance recommendations, and right now that is like all I am in the mood for. I have not really read a historical romance in a while. So this is a small town romance between Daniel and Alexis. We also have a slight age gap going on where Daniel, I believe, is 28, and I think Alexis is around like 37, something like that. And so both of these characters just have a lot going on in their lives. Like, even though this cover would lead you to believe that this might be more of a rom-com, I feel like her books are definitely more serious than that, because like all of her covers look very bright and very happy, but I've heard that like they're all pretty serious at times and pretty angsty, and this book is definitely no exception. So yeah, we have Alexis, and she has recently gotten out of an emotionally abusive relationship, and so even though she recently got out of this relationship, she's still dealing with a lot of pressure from her parents to stay in this relationship and like get counseling because they really like this guy that she was with. And she's also basically forced to still live with him because both of their names are on the deed, and so she's dealing with a lot. So the catalyst for this story is that Alexis, she crashes her car near the small town where Daniel lives. He's also the mayor of the town, by the way, and he helps her out, and then they end up having a one-night stand, and so she starts kind of going back and forth between where she lives and works and visiting him in the town that he lives in, and they start falling for each other. I gave this 5 stars. I really, really loved this. The vibe was just there. Like, I am not an overly critical reader, like when it comes to like writing style and things like that. Like, if I'm just loving the vibe, then I'm most likely gonna give something 5 stars. I'm also someone though that like pacing is very important to me. That's another factor that goes into whether I give a book 5 stars, and so this was paced really well as well. I'm gonna stop saying the heroine's name now because every time I do, my echo dot right here keeps thinking that I'm talking to it, and I'm not. But the heroine did frustrate me at times, not gonna lie. I get that, she's dealing with a lot, but I still didn't love the way that she treated Daniel at times. And sometimes in her inner monologue, she would refer to him as like a boy. Like, that was a huge hang up for her when it came to him, is that like she felt that he was way too young for her. So sometimes she would refer to him as a boy in her inner monologue, and I was like, girl, he is a grown-ass man. Like, what are you talking about? But anyways, I mean, she definitely learns from her mistakes when she fucks up. Daniel is everything. He is the sweetest cinnamon roll hero ever. Love him so much. Also, you'll notice there's a goat on the cover here. That's because throughout the book, he takes care of this baby goat for a friend of his. And yeah, this was just really great. Everything that you could want from a traditionally published romance, except there is no steam at all. At all. Sometimes they'll briefly mention how good the sex that they have is, but like, that's it. So just know that going into it. But I feel like that matches the vibe of the story in general anyway, so like I wasn't really bothered by the lack of steam. So next up we have a Harry Potter fan fiction called Remain Nameless. This is specifically a Hermione fan fiction, so a Draco and Hermione fan fiction. This one definitely feels like a contemporary romance to me, just with a magic system thrown in. So at the beginning of this fan fiction, we see Draco is going to a therapist, partially because that was a part of his punishment and his sentence for being a Death Eater after the war, but also he recognizes that he desperately needs a therapist, as we all do, like I said earlier in this video. And so he starts going to this Muggle coffee shop that is pretty close to where he works. It's pretty close to Diagon Alley. And he just really likes the atmosphere of this place, and he likes feeling like a normal person, you know. Nobody judges him in the Muggle world because nobody knows who he is, whereas in the magic world, he's kind of infamous. You know, people know what he did during the war and what his family did and everything. And so he goes to this coffee shop every morning, and one morning, I believe he goes like earlier than usual, and he sees Hermione go in and grab a cup of coffee, and she leaves right after. So part of him is like mortified of seeing Hermione because he has come to terms with how shitty of a person he was when they were in school and of course during the war, and he definitely blames himself for that whole scene at Malfoy Manor when Bellatrix was torturing Hermione and everything, because he didn't do anything, he didn't step in. And so part of him is mortified that Hermione will see him and recognize him, but part of him is just like fascinated at seeing her again, and he definitely has some type of feelings for her. And so eventually they start sitting together in this coffee shop every morning and they start becoming friends. This is a very slow burn friends to lovers romance. So this is a very slow burn friends to lovers romance, you know. Nothing really happens between the two of them until I want to say like the 40% mark, and this is a very long fan fiction. It is like over 300,000 words. But what I will say is that this author makes that slow burn worth it, because from that point on, there's plenty of sex scenes. They're pretty hot sex scenes as well. And like pretty much all of the sex scenes are like a decent amount of page time. Like very few of them are like really short fade to black ones, but that kind of makes sense with like the direction the plot is going. But like, yeah, all that to say, like, this author makes that slow burn worth it. And Draco in this is just so swoony, and he falls so hard for Hermione, but he just feels so much guilt for how he treated her and her friends in the past, obviously, and like his role in the war and everything. And so obviously he doesn't feel worthy of her, and she kind of feels unworthy of him for a variety of reasons as well. And so I don't think it needed to be quite as long as it is. I also wanted to point out that there is an audiobook for this fan fiction on Spotify. There are people who are essentially podcasters who make audiobooks for fan fictions. So there is a full-length audiobook for this fan fiction, which I think is really great because it'll really help you to get through maybe some of the slower parts of this fanfic. But I really loved it overall, gave it 5 stars. I definitely would recommend it if you are into the Dramini pairing. All right, so next up we have For Aunties and a Wedding by Jessie Sutanto. This is the sequel to Dial A for Aunties, which was a book that came out, was it last year? Maybe the year before, I can't quite remember. But this is essentially like a cozy mystery slash romance slash chick lit series. And it's just like really bonkers plots. So with this one, we have our main character, Medi, and she is finally getting married to Nathan, who we saw a lot of in the previous book. And how that was like a second chance romance. Like they had been in love with each other for a really long time, but they ended up breaking up because of reasons. And so now they're finally back together. They're finally getting married. And so the story of this series really centers around like Medi's relationship with her mom and her aunties, and just like how crazy they can get. Like this family, you guys, like it's a lot in the best way possible. And so she's getting married in England. The catalyst for this story is that she hires this woman who owns her own like wedding planning business with her family. But Medi overhears this woman talking to someone on the phone, and it sounds like she might be a part of the mafia. And so things just get bonkers from there. I enjoyed this. I think I gave it like 3.5 stars overall. I definitely enjoyed book 1 more. I think I gave book 1 like 4.5 stars. Like I really loved book 1. And this one was just kind of fine in comparison. It was still definitely entertaining. It was just something fun for me to listen to. I remember I was like mowing the lawn the day that I was listening to it, and I just kind of flew through the audiobook while doing yard work. So like, you know, I definitely don't regret listening to this, but yeah, book 1 was definitely better. I'll be interested to see if this series continues, and if it does, I don't know that I'll necessarily read the next book, but I do really enjoy this author's writing. I've actually read one of her YA thrillers and I really enjoyed that. She's coming out with quite a few books in kind of different genres. Like I know she's coming out with like a middle grade fantasy soon, if not already. She has another cozy mystery coming out next year that I'm very intrigued about, so I'll definitely read more from this author. Next up we have a DNF. I did not finish this book. This is Dr. Love by Lisa Raven. This is book 3 in Lisa Raven's Mr. Romance series, and let me start off by saying I loved books 1 and 2 of this series. I gave both of them 5 stars. I was so excited going into this book, but this book is just so different from the first 2 books in not a great way. So the plot of this one centers around our 2 main characters, Toby and Joanna. One thing that I felt was a detriment to this book, by the way, I DNF'd this at 50%, so right at the halfway mark. What I felt was a huge detriment to this book is that we only get the hero's point of view. Sometimes that works, like in Priest by Sierra Simone. Sometimes it really doesn't, because in this instance, I really felt like I was missing part of the story by not having the heroine's POV. I really don't know why the author wrote this book the way that she did, because the 2 previous books of this series were dual narration, so you got both the hero and the heroine's point of view. So I really don't know why this was just the hero's point of view, but he is the app designer for this matchmaking app that has this really fancy algorithm and will match people up based on like a percentage of compatibility. And so if you have above like a 60% compatibility, according to this app, you guys are like soulmates, and that's pretty amazing. And so then we have Joanna, who is really good friends with the heroine from book 1 of this series. So Toby and Joanna meet, and it turns out that they have like a very low compatibility rate, like something like 20%, maybe even lower than that. And so now Toby is like, oh shit, because he's the one that designed this app, but he truly feels like him and Joanna have this amazing connection, and she feels the same way. But they're like, yeah, your app says that we would be horrible together, so oops. And so yeah, things go on from there. The thing with this book is that, you know, like I said, I stopped at the 50% mark, and there was very little romance by that point. This is definitely like a slow burn friends to lovers romance. And while that's all fine and good and everything, I don't have any problem with slow burn romances, but like there was like, I did not feel the chemistry between these main characters, like at all. Maybe at the beginning I kind of did, but then I felt like their romance like just didn't really progress in the 50% that I read. What else did I say? Oh, I felt like the plot was just kind of weird too. It just went in a very odd direction that wasn't focused nearly enough on the romance either. So for those reasons, I just didn't feel compelled enough to continue reading. So like I said, I stopped at the 50% mark. So next up, I have the 6 books that I read for a 24-hour reading vlog that I did this past week. I will link that vlog up in the cards above. So I'm definitely not going to talk about these books too much in this video because I discussed all of them in depth in that vlog, but I will briefly discuss the ones that I think are worth discussing. The first one that I read was That Time I Got Drunk and Saved a Demon by Kimberly Lemming. This is a fantasy romance novella. This was incredible. Oh my god, the vibe of this was just absolutely everything. We have our main character, her name is Cinnamon Hot Pepper. She's a part of a family of cinnamon farmers, and so like her and her siblings are all named after different spices. I did discuss this novella in depth quite a bit in that vlog, but what I will say is that like I just loved the vibe between her and Fallon, who is the demon that she falls in love with. And the world this takes place in was just really great, and like all the side characters were absolutely hilarious. Cinnamon herself like is so freaking funny. I was laughing out loud so much while reading this book. Like this was just absolutely incredible. Cannot recommend it highly enough. Next up, what else did I read? I read some graphic novels that I'll briefly mention as well. Ooh, these books are really heavy. The first one I have is Everyone's an Alien When You're an Alien Too by Johnny Soon. This is just a book about an alien who is sent to Earth to study humans and what they're like. This is just like really cute. I'll show you a page of like what the art style looks like. It's very adorable. I ended up giving this 3 stars though. This wasn't anything all that mind-blowing for me, but it was just cute. I also read volume 1 of Lore Olympus. Really loved this. Gave it 5 stars. This is a Hades and Persephone retelling. I'll show you a page of the art style of this one, and yeah, I'm absolutely obsessed. I can't wait to read volume 2. Volume 3 is set to come out, I believe, at the end of this year. I also read The Phantom of the Opera, which is just a graphic novel version of the stage musical that we all know and love. I gave this one 4 stars. This was just like a vibe. Like, this was a time, because while I was reading it, like, they straight up just use lyrics and dialogue from the show in this, and so I was singing the songs while reading this. It was just like, you know, a really fun time. I did also read My Killer Vacation by Tessa Bailey. I also discussed this one at length in that reading vlog just because I have some thoughts about the audiobook. This was just like fine. I gave it 4 stars. Like, I wasn't really blown away by anything in this book. The romance was just fine for me. I expect more from Tessa Bailey's steamy scenes, so like that didn't really blow me away. The murder mystery was pretty forgettable in my opinion. Like, I didn't even mention that in my vlog, so yeah, but I still like had a good time with it, so that's why I gave it 4 stars. And then the last book that I read for that vlog was The Push by Ashley O'Drain, so I'll just set that up while I'm putting on my blush. This is a psychological drama. I do think it's kind of mismarketed because I had heard that this was like a mystery thriller. Like, that is definitely how this book is marketed, and I do not think it is a thriller by any means. This is basically a psychological drama about the cycle of abuse between mothers and daughters, but also just like intergenerational trauma. We also have an evil kid that we're dealing with, which is a trope that I particularly enjoy. I don't know what that says about me. We're not going to explore that. But yeah, I gave this 4 stars. I thought it was really good, really solid. Definitely go into this with some caution, especially if you yourself are a mother, or if you have ever suffered any kind of loss as a mother. Definitely go into this with some caution, but I thought that it was very solid. It definitely did what it set out to do. All right, so there is the lipstick, and I'm done with my makeup now. I do think it's a little too warm toned for my skin tone and my complexion. I usually go with a cooler tone blue based red, but it's a beautiful shade and it's a really nice, comfortable matte formula. So I might have to check out more of these retro matte lipsticks. I really like how it feels on my lips because it doesn't feel like my lips are like dried out or anything like that. But yeah, the last couple books that I want to talk about, I have been rereading the first couple books in Cora Riley's Born in Blood Mafia Chronicles series. So this is a mafia romance series that also has a spin-off called the Kimura Chronicles, which I'm really excited about getting to. And by the way, I do want to point out that I am aware of past mistakes that Cora Riley has made. I'm not going to get into that in this video. You can look that up on Google or Instagram. I'm sure information will pop up. But I still was really excited about this series, especially because I know so many people that absolutely adore the spin-off series. Like I said, that's the Kimura Chronicles. So I read the first 3 books in this series. I'm just going to put Bound by Honor up here. I read the first couple books last June, and for some reason I just didn't continue on with the series, and so I needed to reread these before just jumping into book 4, and I've just been having a really fun time. I'm actually currently rereading book 3 which is Bound by Hatred. And these are all just like really solid mafia romances. I feel like Cora Riley does a really great job of pacing her books. Like, I always just fly through these audiobooks. I feel like there's never a dull moment. These are just edited very well. They're very solid, you know, angsty, dark mafia romances. I'm just like having such a fun time rereading these books before, like I said, jumping into book 4. I do actually have a historical romance that I recently read. This is You Were Made to Be Mine by Julie Anne Long. This is book 5 in her Palace of Rogue series. I was so excited going into this book because Julianne Long, I will say, she has been a hit or miss author with me. I read a couple books in her Pennyroyal Green series. Some of them I've liked, some of them not so much. This series is kind of the same. I enjoyed book 1, loved book 2, one of my favorite romances that I read last year. Enjoyed book 3, it was just kind of fine. Book 4 was one of my favorite romances that I've read this year. So I was really hoping that this book would be another book that I just like absolutely adored by Julianne Long, and unfortunately that wasn't the case. This is actually my least favorite book that I have read by this author so far. I gave this 2.5 stars. Oof. So just to tell you a little bit about the plot, we have Orly and Christian. Basically, Christian has been in prison for the last 3 years because his cousin, I don't know, his relative basically ratted him out to the French. He was an English spy, and so the French put him in prison for the last 3 years, so he just got out. And now his cousin that definitely ratted him out has now asked Christian to track down his fiance, whose name is Orly, and to bring her back to him. And so that's what he sets out to do, which leads him to the Grand Palace on the Thames, which is the boarding house that this series centers around. This is introduced pretty early on in the book, but the reason why Orly left Brundage, who is Christian's relative, is because Brundage raped her. So definite content warning for that. We don't see it happen on the page, but it is discussed in enough detail, I would say. So here's the thing. This book had, like, this romance had amazing ingredients, in my opinion, because I really liked both the hero and heroine. I loved their backstories. I was really excited for these two characters to get together. But here's the thing. This book is way too plot driven. It does not focus on the romance nearly enough, to the point where the hero and heroine don't even meet on page until 30% in, and the romance doesn't even kick in until 60% in, which only leaves, you know, 40% of the book for their romance to be developed. And so I just didn't feel their romance at all because we just didn't get enough page time of them talking to each other and bonding and falling for each other. And so by, I think it was like the 85% mark was their sex scene, and then they confessed their love to each other. I just didn't believe it because it just was not developed nearly enough. I know I keep saying the same thing over and over again. And I also felt like the second half was weaker than the first half because I actually was enjoying the whole first half. Like, I probably would give that first half 4 stars, but then the second half quickly deteriorated for me. And like I said, I just was not believing the romance at all. And it was just, yeah, just very disappointing. I definitely expect more from this author. It almost makes me hesitant going into the next book of this series because this series is still going on. Yeah, very, very disappointed in this one, and I definitely would not recommend it, just being straight up with you guys. I would, however, recommend book 2, which is Angel in a Devil's Arms, and book 4, which is After Dark with the Duke. Those are fantastic romances. And then finally, I have some graphic novels that I read recently that I really enjoyed. I'm definitely getting back into graphic novels. I was really into them in like 2018, 2019, and then I kind of got out of it, and now I'm back into them again. So the first one I want to talk about is Garlic and the Vampire by Brie Paulson. This is a really adorable middle grade graphic novel about these vegetable people. Like, I'm so terrible at describing graphic novel plots, I feel like. But you can kind of tell like what I'm talking about. Garlic, our main character, she's a person, but she's also garlic. And so she lives in this town where humans and vegetable people coexist happily. And this vampire moves into the creepy castle nearby, and so they decide to send Garlic to go confront him because obviously vampires can't stand garlic, and things go on from there. This was just so adorable, so wholesome. This also had the perfect autumnal vibes. Like this would be a perfect cute little graphic novel to read around Halloween time. I loved the art style as well, and this is a series. Book 2 is set to come out in a few months, and that one is going to be about Garlic and her interaction with a witch of some kind. So yeah, I highly recommend this. I gave it 5 stars. Then the last 2 books I have to talk about are Sheets by Brenna Thumler. So this is actually a reread for me because she recently came out with a sequel to this. So I read this for the first time back in 2018. I loved it the first time that I read it. I gave it 5 stars. Upon reread, I gave it 4 stars. I still think it's a really great graphic novel. I think that this is more middle grade slash like lower YA, and it centers around our main character, Marjorie, and she's dealing with a lot of grief. Her mother recently passed away, and her father is like so distant and absent now. Like he just stays in his room all the time. He is not very present in her and her brother's lives anymore. She's kind of stuck running their family business by herself. They run a laundromat. And so she meets this ghost named Wendell. I really love this author's art style, especially like the color scheme that she uses. Like she uses a lot of like purples and like cool tone blues and pinks. Like I just love those tones together. And this first graphic novel, it's just like a really great combination of sweet, cute, and sad. And I do think it does a good job of exploring themes like grief and loss and all of that. And so then pretty much right after rereading this, I jumped into Delicates, which is the sequel that Brenna released, I believe, last year. So this one is definitely heavier than Sheets. We also get introduced to a new pretty major character who by the end of the graphic novel, her and Marjorie end up being best friends. Her name is Eliza. She's into photography. Content warning for suicidal ideation. That was something that to me kind of came out of nowhere, but that is covered in this graphic novel. And so we still see Wendell, the ghost from book 1, and Marjorie is still working at her family's laundromat, but life is definitely better for Marjorie and her family. This one definitely focuses more on like Eliza and her pain and her mental issues, I would say. So I liked this one as well. I gave it 4 stars. I definitely think that because this novel is just heavier than book 1, I feel like some people are going to prefer this one and some people are going to prefer book 1. It just depends on like what you're looking for from this story and from this vibe, but I thought that both graphic novels were really solid. I definitely would recommend them if you're looking to get into YA/middle grade graphic novels. So that is going to be it for my mid-July reading wrap up. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I would love it if you would leave a comment down below if you want to discuss any of the books I brought up in this video. I would also love it if you would leave a like and subscribe, and I thank you so much in advance if you do, and I will see you guys in the next video. Bye! So the catalyst for their romance is that Alexis crashes her car near... No, I wasn't talking to you. This is what happens when you have an Alexa right next to you. No, I was not talking to you.